1001 Arabian Nights, Chapter 4 Sinbad the Sailor's Second Voyage. "Be quick," said King Shahryar the next night, throwing himself down on his bed alongside his wife. "Sinbad's treasure ship is trapped between pirates in some dreadful island." Why was the captain so terrified? "Ah, well," said Shahrazad. He knew the stories about those waters, but I asked myself who had told him the stories, for no one had ever escaped alive from the island of cannibals. "The island of cannibals?" whispered the king, severing the fear that slid down his throat like a raw muscle. "Tell me, Shahrazad." "Not I, but Sinbad must tell this story," said Shahrazad, "for surely I can know nothing of such terrible things." The pirate ship was manned by a crew of dwarfs, wizened, yellow little men whose fathers were surely monkeys, for they swarmed aboard like a pack of chattering apes. They stood no higher than a man's thigh, but they bit and scratched and leaped on us from the rigging, where whole hordes of them swung about, shrieking and jabbering and baring their long yellow teeth. Our clothes and skin in tatters, we huddled together at the stern, powerless to fight these darting, treacherous ape-men with our slow fists and short, feeble cutlasses. They took control of the ship, let out all the sails, and steered us at full speed for the island, to give it its true name, the Isle of Zagib. In the shallows they carried us ashore, 4 or 5 ape-men supporting each sailor. Then, as the last of us was thrown down on the sand, they all leaped aboard our ship and drew away from shore. "Allah be praised," I said. "They may have been the most ugly creatures living, but at least they did not kill us. They were obviously thieves of mercy." "Oh, Sinbad, what kind of food did your parents feed and educate? Did I sit on that beach and call those ape-men thieves of mercy? They were no more merciful than a housewife who puts cheese in the traps to feed poor, hungry mice." Behind the beach stood a towering fort surrounded by a high wall. Facing us was a gate worked all in ivory, which stood half open. So we went inside and looked about. We saw no one, friend in nothing, but for a few cooking pots as huge as horse throws, some barbecue skewers longer than spears, and a few broken benches. Littering this deserted courtyard were several hundred white bones, put out for the owner's dogs, or so we assumed. As no one answered our greetings, we curled up in our cloaks and slept. And I, believing that my greatest misfortune lay in losing my cargo and sheep. Fool that I was, fool that I was. At sunset, we were woken by the earth shaking under us. The ivory gates swung fully open, and a grotesque giant shuffled in and bolted them behind him. His head could only have pleased his mother. His cheeks hung down to his chest like a camel's dewlaps. He was as bald and tusked as a walrus, and the folds of skin under his eyes would have made hammocks for sailors. His ears draped over his shoulders, and he barked a great deal, dragging his knuckles along the ground so that his nails, like 2 farm harrows, plowed up the soil. The giant lit a fire, sat down beside it, and then looked us over thoughtfully. We were no surprise to him. The monkey man had simply made their regular delivery. A barricade of fat fingers trapped me against a wall and rolled me into his fat palm as though I were sweet meat. The giant poked and prodded me, but as I was still thin from my earlier shipwreck, I did not please him. Instead, he picked up the fat sheep's cook between finger and thumb and cooked him on a spit over the fire, crunching him up with obvious satisfaction and spitting out the larger bones. Almost at once he fell asleep for the night, leaving us desperate with fear, but unable to climb the high, smooth wall of the fort. Every day was the same. The giant went out in the morning, bolted the gates, and came back in the evening with a ravenous appetite. He would choose the fattest sailor from the crew and roast and eat him barbecued for supper. "O Allah, decider of all fates," we cried out, legless with terror, "could you not have let the ship founder or be swallowed by the whale? This is no way for a believer or native of Baghdad to meet his end. We should have thrown ourselves into the sea when we first saw the pirate apes." In short, it seemed time to act. There were only a handful of us skinny sailors left. I suggested that a giant would soon start eating us two at a time. "In order to defend ourselves, we must attack," I said. "But first, we must know our escape route. Let's tie these benches together into a ladder and be ready to climb the wall tonight." That evening, after the ship's second lieutenant had satisfied the giant's hunger, we watched the ugly brute settle down to sleep, and then we crept to the fireside. Holding two of the skewers across the coals, we heated their points white hot, and, carrying them as undertakers carry coffins, we ran at the head of the sleeping cannibal. His snores blew our turbans off, but on we charged and plunged the white-hot spits into his red-rimmed, blue-lidded eyes. The bosun fell into the giant's cavernous mouth as the cannibal let out a yell like doomsday. We were thrown in all directions as the grotesque beast staggered to his knees and slapped the ground trying to squash us like flies. Because he could not see us, we were able to lean our makeshift ladder against the wall and climbed out, pulling the benches over behind us, for they were to serve as our raft. But we had no sooner pushed off from the shore, paddling with our hands, than a female giant with the same julep cheeks, ears flapping as she ran, appeared on the beach, leading the blinded cannibal by the hand. Truly the sight of them was so repulsive that the shallow shoreline waves wrinkled up their noses. The giants stood howling at us from the beach, baring their fangs and barking as great black conger eels bark on the hook. Then they picked up boulders and threw them at the raft, swamping it with pitching waves and smashing some of the boards. Only 3 of us were left clinging to the raft when it drifted beyond range of the falling rocks and limped out on the open ocean. For a day and a night we watched for land until our eyes were as dry as peebles, and then we slept. "Wake up! Wake up!" I cried shortly before dawn. "The sea's as still as the milk in a cat's saucer. We must have entered a lagoon." Lying on our raft, we waited for the sun to tell us what kind of land the sea had brought us to. Little by little it lit a circle of scaly coral which totally enclosed the raft so that I could not tell how we had sailed inside. I was remarking on the multicolored scales of the reef when the sea monster, whose coils had surrounded us, lifted its multicolored head and slipped a sailor off the raft. Round and round its coils wreathed, spinning the raft in a whirlpool of snake. At night it was hidden by darkness, but its loud hissing made us long to hear waves breaking on Arabian beaches before we met our end. In the morning I was all alone. The sea serpent had licked my last companion off the deck and left me one more day in which to praise Allah. It seemed time to act. I tore up the benches from the edge of the raft and raised wooden walls and a roof so that I was floating in a leaden wooden box. At least, if I am to die, said I, Sinbad will have a respectable coffin, as befits a believer. Round and round the sea snake wheeled, spinning the crate in a whirlpool of serpent. Then in the night it nosed me up and down, hissing like a punctured elephant. But truly it found Sinbad and his coffin an indigestible meal, and swam off by first light to wreck the ships of believers and unbelievers alike. May Allah grant it a short life. My flimsy box was sighted by a merchant ship. The sailors mistook it for a crate washed overboard from a cargo ship, and were greatly amazed to prise open the lid and find a creature of my kind inside. The sailors did not press me for my story, and I rested below decks for several days, interested only in eating and sleeping, though they told me that I cried out in my sleep, "Oh Allah, maroon me on the island of Zugud. If I ever see Baghdad again and do not stay at home to grow old." "The captain is from Baghdad," said the second mate, "but we won't be docking there again. He will have to sell the ship at the next port we come to. Times are bad in shipping and he is nearly ruined." The sailor shook his head disappointedly. "And they say the captain has a rich cargo waiting in a Baghdad warehouse, but he won't sell it in case the owner comes back to claim it. Come back from the dead after 70 years. Sinbad won't come back. He went down with a whale to the kingdom where only the fish can breathe." I dropped from a hammock and begged them to take me to the captain. The old man did not recognize me at once, but I remembered his face so well as the ship pulled away from the whale island, and his voice shouting, "Aboard! Aboard! Or you are all dead men." I was so grateful to the good captain for keeping my cargo that I gave him half its value. And one of the ships they had found its way back from the far distant Diamond Valley. For I am almost embarrassed to tell you what wealth awaited me at home. My friends, the trade winds had shepherded my scattered fleet to Basra harbor, and there the cargoes had been sold for more dinars than can be counted on an abacus. The captain came to visit me here when he was in port, bringing stories from the liquid mountains of the sea, where there are as many wonderful beasts and fabulous islands as there are trees in a forest. I was tempted, Allah forgive me, to set sail again on other voyages, and I met with other adventures. But I have stolen too many moments from the span of your life, said Sinbad the sailor to Sinbad the porter. May Allah reward you and all those who have an attentive ear and can listen with their hearts to an old man's stories. Sinbad sailed on 5 more voyages, my attentive and unsleeping lord. Shahrazad slipped from bed and began to dress, for bright morning stood in the window, and the royal swordsman stood in the courtyard below. I wonder how many ears have heard him describe the fight between the great rhinoceros and the elephant. Shahrazad, aren't you afraid of the swordsman? Her husband interrupted her. No, my lord, she answered with honesty, for in her heart of hearts she had no fear of the swordsman, only of his sword. She continued to dress quickly and cheerfully. Shahrazad, aren't you even afraid of death? She looked at him with her head on one side. O fearless, long-lived king, she said, I know that death is huge and ugly and threatening, but so was the genie in the tale of the fisherman and the bottle, and you know how that story ended. Shahryar searched the library of his memory for the tale of the fisherman and the bottle, for who but Shahrazad could know that the story was as new as tomorrow, a half-hatched story with scarcely a word to fly on. No, Shahrazad, I have questioned my heart, and it claims not to know the tale of the fisherman and the bottle. Oh dear, said Shahrazad, opening the door onto the staircase. Poor heart. Wife, said Shahryar, his temper flaring up, I do not like there to be stories lying around in this kingdom without me knowing of them. Come back tonight and tell me the tale of the fisherman and the bottle. The swordsman can wait another day, I command you. To hear you is to obey, said Shahrazad, and turned another way along the corridor.